The silence in the container office hung heavy as Morgan stared at her parents across the metal desk. Her father's face had aged a decade in just months, deep lines carving valleys between his brows. Her mother's perfectly manicured nails now chipped her designer clothes, replaced by a threadbare sweater that spoke volumes about their fall from grace. "No," Morgan said, her voice steady despite the storm in her chest. "I will not give you money. I bought Lily's lakefront villa." Her father's mouth fell open. Her mother's hand flew to her throat. "And if you want to stay there," Morgan continued, sliding a contract across the polished surface of her desk, "you'll have to pay rent to me." The shock in their eyes mirrored the same dismissive look they had given her 5 years ago, when they had handed her the deed to this barren plot of land, with a cruel joke about sleeping under the stars. The same stars that now illuminated the sign of her thriving food park empire. Where would you draw the line if your own family made you their punchline? The Under the Stars food park logo glowed in soft neon against the Austin night sky, casting purple-blue shadows across Morgan's face as she watched her parents' world collapse all over again. 5 years earlier, the university auditorium buzzed with excitement. Graduation caps had already been tossed, professional photographs taken, and now families gathered in intimate circles for private celebrations. The Carter family stood in a tight cluster near the grand staircase, Morgan and Lily side by side in identical caps and gowns, their physical similarities striking despite 23 years of being treated entirely differently. "Girls," their father announced, his voice carrying that special tone reserved for momentous occasions. "Your mother and I wanted to do something special to mark this day." The small crowd of extended family and friends leaned in. Aunt Patricia clutched her pearls in anticipation. Uncle Robert nodded approvingly, already in on the secret. Morgan felt a flutter of hope. Perhaps today finally the playing field would level. After all, they had graduated with the same honors, though, from different departments. Her engineering degree had been earned through countless sleepless nights and relentless work, while Lily's performance arts major had been punctuated with showcases where their parents occupied front-row seats. For Lily, their father continued, pulling out an envelope tied with a silver ribbon. "Who has made us proud every step of the way?" Lily stepped forward, accepting the envelope with practiced grace. Her fingers, delicate and unmarked by tools or machinery, untied the ribbon with elegant precision. "Oh my God," she gasped, pulling out photos of a stunning waterfront property. "Is this your new home?" Their mother finished, beaming. "A lakefront villa on Lake Austin. 3 bedrooms, private dock, and that studio space you always wanted for your performances." The crowd erupted in applause. Aunt Patricia wiped away a tear. Cameras flashed, capturing Lily's perfect expression of joy. Morgan stood still, hands clasped before her, waiting. Her turn would come next. Perhaps a starter home in a good neighborhood. A condo downtown. Something to match her practical nature, just as the villa matched Lily's artistic flair. "And for Morgan," her father said, his tone noticeably cooled as he handed her a simple white envelope without ribbon or ceremony. The paper felt thin between her fingers. Inside was a deed and a single photograph of an empty, dusty lot on the outskirts of the city. Cracked earth, scattered rocks, and a lone withered tree at the far corner. "You can sleep under the stars," her father added with a chuckle that others quickly echoed. "You always were more outdoorsy." Morgan's throat constricted. Her heartbeat thundered so violently she thought it might shatter her ribcage. The photograph trembled in her hand, but her face remained composed. Years of practice had taught her to hide the tremors of hurt beneath a mask of acceptance. "Thank you," she managed, her voice steady, despite everything crumbling inside. Her mother patted her shoulder, a gesture lacking the embrace she had given Lily moments before. "You'll figure something out. You always do." Laughter rippled through the family circle, not cruel, but dismissive. The kind of laughter that said her pain wasn't real, that her disappointment was just another quirk of her odd personality. Something to be expected from the strange twin who preferred wrenches to socializing. Morgan tucked the envelope into her graduation gown pocket, feeling its weight like a stone against her heart. As the celebration continued, around Lily, Morgan stood at the periphery, watching her family orbit her sister as they had always done. In that moment, As champagne flowed and plans were discussed for Lily's housewarming party, Morgan made a silent vow that the humiliation burning in her chest would one day become the foundation of something no one could dismiss. The twins were 8 years old the first time Morgan truly understood she was different in her parents' eyes. It was a crisp autumn morning when she discovered an old radio in the garage, while Lily practiced ballet in the living room. The soft classical music from Lily's practice drifted through the house, creating a soundtrack to their divergent childhoods. Morgan had carefully removed the back panel of the radio, fascinated by the circuit board and wiring within. Her small fingers traced each connection, mind racing, to understand how everything worked together. When she found a loose wire, something clicked in her understanding. She reached for a screwdriver, determined to fix it. "Morgan Carter!" Her mother's voice shattered her concentration. "What on earth are you doing? Put that down before you hurt yourself!" The screwdriver was snatched from her hand before she could explain. Her mother's face twisted with a mixture of concern and disappointment. "Why can't you play with normal things? Look at this mess. Your grandfather's old junk isn't for little girls." "But Mom, I almost fixed it," Morgan protested, reaching for the radio that was now being placed on a high shelf. "Fixed it, you'll electrocute yourself." Her mother sighed, wiping her hands on her apron, as if touching the radio had dirtied them. "Come inside. Aunt Patricia is coming over to see Lily's new dance routine." From the shadowed doorway, her grandfather James appeared, his weathered face kind beneath a cap worn soft with age. "Leave the child be, Margaret," he said quietly. She wasn't hurting anything. Her mother turned exasperation evident. "Dad, please don't encourage this. She needs to develop normal interests. Look at Lily. Every teacher says she's gifted. Meanwhile, Morgan is disassembling appliances." Grandpa James knelt beside Morgan, his knees creaking with the effort. "Your mother means well," he whispered. "But remember, you don't need to be loud to shine. You just need to create something no one can ignore." Later that day, Aunt Patricia and the other visitors gathered in the living room. Lily performed her routine flawlessly, her small body graceful in pink tulle. Morgan watched from the kitchen doorway, still holding a screwdriver her grandfather had secretly returned to her. "Just look at how different twins can be." Her mother marveled to the guests, gesturing between her daughters. Nature versus nurture playing out right before our eyes. But nature hadn't created the divide between them. The nurture had, uneven and imbalanced from the beginning. Their 12th birthday sharply etched the family's priorities into Morgan's heart. The backyard had been transformed with twinkling lights and pastel decorations. A professional photographer captured every moment as Lily's friends arrived in party dresses, with perfectly braided hair and monogrammed gift bags. Morgan had invited just 2 friends, both from the science club, but only one had come. They sat awkwardly at the edge of the celebration, watching Lily hold court among her admirers. "Present time," their mother announced, clapping her hands to gather everyone. The gifts for Lily formed a small mountain on the table: jewelry boxes, designer clothing, art supplies from the expensive boutique downtown. Morgan's much smaller pile contained primarily books about engineering and a set of basic tools she had specifically requested. Then came the family gifts. Morgan watched her father wheel out a gleaming white piano, a huge red bow affixed to its polished surface. "For you, Lily," he announced proudly. "An instrument worthy of your talent." The crowd applauded as Lily rushed to touch the keys, reverently posing for photographs that would later hang in the family room. Morgan waited, heart-pounding, wondering what her gift might be. Perhaps the advanced electronics kit she'd circled in catalogs for months, or the telescope she'd mentioned when they visited the science museum. "And Morgan," her mother said, her smile tightening almost imperceptibly, "Grandpa has something for you." Grandpa James stepped forward, holding a wooden box with brass hinges. His eyes held an apology and pride in equal measure. Inside the box was a set of electrical repair tools, well-worn but quality instruments that had clearly seen years of use. "These were mine," he said softly, "for the girl who can fix anything." Morgan's hands trembled as she lifted a multimeter from the set. It was perfect, exactly what she needed for her projects. More than the tools themselves, it was the acknowledgement of her passion that made her eyes shine. "Like grandfather, like granddaughter," her mother murmured, a note of resignation in her voice. Laughter rippled through the gathering. Not cruel laughter, but the kind that stung nonetheless. The laughter of people who viewed Morgan's interests as a curious oddity, something to be tolerated rather than celebrated. In the photographs from that day, Lily stands radiant at her piano, while Morgan sits cross-legged on the grass, the wooden box open beside her. Two girls born minutes apart, already worlds away from each other, traveling separate orbits that occasionally intersected but never truly aligned. One summer evening, when the twins were 14, Morgan accidentally discovered how her mother truly saw her. She had been in the garden hands dirty from planting the tomato seedlings Grandpa James had given her, when she heard her mother's voice drifting over the fence as she spoke to their neighbor. "They're twins," her mother said, her voice carrying in the still evening air. "But Lily is what every mother dreams of." Morgan froze behind the lavender bushes, the watering can heavy in her hands. The casual dismissal cut deeper than any direct criticism ever could. It wasn't that she wasn't good enough. It was that she wasn't even the right kind of daughter. That night, unable to sleep, Morgan climbed onto the roof outside her bedroom window. Below in the garden, Lily was entertaining friends, the soft notes of her playing drifting upward. Morgan tilted her head toward the vast sky stars scattered like possibilities across the darkness. For the first time, she allowed herself to wonder if she truly was the unwanted child, a spare created alongside the perfect daughter her parents had hoped for. But then Grandpa James's words echoed in her mind. "You don't need their approval, Morgan. You just need to know you're walking the right path." Morgan traced constellations with her finger against the night sky, finding patterns where others saw only scattered points of light. Perhaps that was her gift, seeing connections and possibilities invisible to those around her. High school only widened the gulf between the twins. Lily blossomed as expected, led in the school musical homecoming court president of the Arts Council. Morgan found her own niche in the robotics lab and engineering club, but her achievements existed in a parallel universe, acknowledged by teachers, but barely registered at home. In their junior year, Lily received a brand new Mini Cooper for her birthday, the car wrapped in an enormous bow in the driveway. Morgan continued riding the old bicycle she had rebuilt herself, its wheels clattering each morning as she made her way to school in the pre-dawn hours for robotics practice. "You're like the background character in a teen movie," Lily once remarked, as Morgan oiled her bicycle chain in the driveway, while Lily's friends admired her new car. Morgan said nothing, just continued her methodical work. Some words carve themselves into your heart whether you want them to or not. When Morgan won the state science fair with a homemade engine prototype, the small trophy she brought home was met with her father's tepid response. "Are you really planning to work with machines your whole life? A girl should study something more refined." That evening after dinner, dishes were cleared. Morgan retreated to the garage, turned on the single bulb that hung from the ceiling, and began disassembling a new radio to understand its components. As rain drummed against the tin roof, she made a silent promise to herself. One day she would make him say her name without that sigh in his voice. Grandpa James was the only one who never compared the twins. In his eyes, Morgan's mechanical aptitude wasn't a quirk to be corrected, but a gift to be nurtured. He often told stories from his younger days, as an engineer explaining concepts that Morgan absorbed with hungry fascination. "People only appreciate what's easy to see," he told her, as they rebuilt an old lawnmower engine together. But real value often hides in what no one bothers to notice. When Morgan once asked why her mother never smiled at her the way she did at Lily, he simply replied, "It's not that you're not good enough. You're just different, and people fear what's different." She carried those words through the hallways at school, through family dinners, where Lily's latest accomplishment dominated conversation through nights spent working alone in the garage, while music and laughter drifted from Lily's room full of friends. Senior year brought college acceptances. Lily, as expected, received offers from prestigious arts programs. When Morgan's acceptance to the engineering program at MIT arrived with a partial scholarship, her letter was read with polite interest, but quickly overshadowed by Lily's decision to attend the local state university's renowned performing arts school. "It's practical," her mother said when Morgan questioned why they weren't encouraging Lily to attend a more prestigious out-of-state program. "This way she can live at home and save money. Plus, we can attend all her performances." no such concerns were expressed about Morgan moving across the country. In fact, her parents seemed relieved at the distance her education would create. When Grandpa James passed away during their sophomore year of college, Morgan was the only one at his bedside. Lily was at a showcase performance that their parents wouldn't let her miss. Grandpa would understand, they insisted. This could be important for her career. So Morgan sat alone, holding the weathered hand that had guided hers through countless projects. His breathing had grown labored each rise and fall of his chest, a struggle against the inevitable. "Ava," he whispered, his voice faint as morning mist. "Keep building. One day the world will need hands that know how to mend." She didn't fully understand what he meant then, but she knew he wasn't just talking about machines. He was talking about her, about rebuilding a life piece by piece from whatever materials were at hand. His fingers loosened around hers, and the hospital room fell quiet, save for the mechanical beep of monitors that could measure his heart rate, but not the depth of his absence. After the funeral, Morgan returned home to find Lily live streaming from the living room, showing followers the elaborate flower arrangement she had received to honor our beloved grandfather. Morgan quietly placed Grandpa James's old wrench on the small altar the family had created, then retreated to the garage without a word. That same evening, her parents began discussing their futures over dinner. "Lily will study marketing at NYU," her father said proudly, refilling his wine glass. "Perfect complement to her performance background. Very practical for the entertainment industry." His gaze shifted to Morgan, enthusiasm dimming noticeably. "And you, Morgan, maybe one of those local tech schools would suit you better after you finish your current program. Somewhere more appropriate." Morgan nodded. No argument, no complaint. She was used to it. But deep inside, the small seed planted by years of dismissal began to grow into something harder and more determined, a seed of silent independence that would eventually crack the foundation of everything her family thought they knew about her. From that point forward, Morgan spent even more time in the garage teaching herself welding, cutting, and basic programming beyond what her formal education provided. Late at night when the whole house slept, she kept the light on and worked the hum of drills and the rhythm of hammering, becoming her own kind of music. She knew no one would ever applaud what she was doing, but she didn't need applause. She just needed to become good enough that one day when they spoke her name, they would hesitate before dismissing her again. The gap between the twins grew even wider. While Lily's social media documented parties' performances and a growing following for her lifestyle content, Morgan's digital footprint remained minimal. She existed primarily in forums where engineering problems were discussed, where usernames and avatars mattered more than appearances or family connections. When Morgan received the prestigious Westinghouse internship in her junior year, the news was announced at dinner as an afterthought between discussions of Lily's upcoming showcase and their mother's charity gala. "Oh, and Morgan got some kind of technical internship," her father mentioned, already reaching for the salt. "That's nice, dear," her mother replied without looking up from her plate. "Lily, about your costume fitting tomorrow." Morgan ate silently, already planning the projects she would tackle during the internship. Their approval had become irrelevant, a currency she no longer sought to earn. Instead, she focused on building skills that would translate into the only kind of independence that would matter: financial and creative freedom. By graduation, the twins had become almost strangers, despite living under the same roof during breaks. Lily had cultivated her personal brand as a performing arts influencer, her Instagram filled with perfectly filtered moments of apparent spontaneity. Morgan had accumulated patents and practical experience, her resume solid with accomplishments that would open doors in the engineering world. Neither sister hated the other. Their relationship existed in a strange neutral territory. Not close, not antagonistic, just separate lives that occasionally intersected at family functions, where they performed the roles expected of them. And then came graduation day with its lakefront villa and barren plot of land, with its applause for one sister and dismissive laughter for the other, with its final unmistakable message about who was valued and who was tolerated. As the family celebration continued into the evening, Morgan slipped away unnoticed. She drove to the empty lot she now owned, parking at its edge as the sun began to set. The deed had listed it as undeveloped land with commercial potential, a description that had elicited snickers during the gift giving. She stepped onto the cracked earth, feeling it solid beneath her feet, despite its abandoned appearance. In the fading light, she walked its perimeter, counting paces, noting the position of the sun, observing how wind moved across the open space. Sleep under the stars, they had laughed. Morgan tilted her head up as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. For the first time since the ceremony, she allowed herself to smile. Not the polite, restrained expression she had maintained throughout the day, but something truer and more determined. "I will," she whispered to the empty lot, to the emerging stars, to herself. "And then I'll build something no one can ignore." As night settled fully over Austin, Morgan stayed on her land, thinking of Grandpa James and his belief in her hands that could mend and create. Thinking of all the times she had been overlooked and underestimated. Thinking of the path forward that suddenly seemed clearer than it had ever been. The pain of the day's humiliation still burned, but now it transformed into something else. A molten core of determination that would eventually cool and harden into the foundation of her own small empire. An empire built beneath the very stars they had mockingly assigned to her. When Morgan finally drove away from the lot that night, she left behind the person she had been, the girl who silently accepted her family's dismissal. In her place stood a woman who understood that some gifts, no matter how painful their giving, contain possibilities that the givers never imagined. Morgan's tires kicked up dust as she pulled onto the empty lot the day after graduation. The morning sun cast long shadows across the cracked earth, revealing its imperfections in harsh detail. What had seemed merely neglected in the fading light of yesterday now looked actively hostile to any purpose. Scattered rocks, patches of stubborn weeds and dirt packed so hard, it might as well have been concrete. She parked her secondhand Honda at the edge of the property and stepped out, work boots crunching on the gravel. Unlike yesterday's impulsive visit in her graduation dress today, she came prepared: jeans, a sturdy flannel shirt, leather gloves tucked into her back pocket, and a notebook filled with hastily sketched ideas. The property stretched roughly an acre, bordered on one side by a seldom-used access road, and on the others by similar undeveloped parcels. No neighbors, no infrastructure, no particular reason anyone would stop here. Precisely why her parents had considered it a joke rather than a gift. Morgan walked the perimeter again, this time, making careful notes about dimensions, gradients, and potential access points. The hot Texas sun climbed higher as she worked, sweat beading along her hairline, but she barely noticed. Her engineering mind had kicked into full gear, seeing not what was, but what could be. By noon, she'd created a rough site survey and sat cross-legged in the meager shade of her car, drinking lukewarm water from a thermos. Her phone buzzed with celebratory messages in the family group chat. Pictures of Lily touring her lakefront villa, exclamations over its granite countertops, and panoramic views, plans already forming for a housewarming party. Morgan scrolled through without commenting, then switched to her browser and typed Austin food truck regulations. The search returned hundreds of results: permit requirements, health department certifications, zoning ordinances. She bookmarked page after page, the kernel of an idea taking root. As afternoon faded toward evening, Morgan made one final circuit of the property. On impulse, she walked to the center, knelt, and pressed her palm against the sun-warmed earth. "I'll be back," she promised quietly. Instead of driving home to the house where her graduation gifts would still be a topic of conversation, Morgan stopped at a camping supply store. She emerged with a small tent, sleeping bag, and portable lamp, necessities for the night ahead. The sun was setting when she returned to the lot. She parked in the same spot, but now unloaded her new purchases, methodically setting up the simple tent. The clerk had raised eyebrows when she'd mentioned camping alone in an empty lot, but Morgan had always been comfortable with solitude. As darkness fell completely over Austin, she reclined on top of her sleeping bag, tent flap open to the night sky. The stars emerged one by one, brilliant against the velvet darkness, undiminished by city lights this far from downtown. Sleep under the stars, they had mocked. Tonight she would do exactly that. The irony wasn't lost on her as she pulled out her notebook again, clicking on her lamp. By its narrow beam, Morgan began sketching more detailed plans. Not architectural drawings yet, but vision boards of what this barren patch might become. She thought of the trending food courts she'd researched earlier, urban spaces transformed by creativity and repurposed materials. What if the very emptiness of this place was its potential? What if instead of a traditional building requiring enormous capital she didn't have, she created something modular that could grow organically? Around midnight, the idea crystallized in a rough sketch, shipping containers arranged strategically to create kitchen spaces and covered seating areas. Each container could house a different food concept, creating variety while sharing infrastructure costs. The empty space between would become gathering areas with string lights suspended overhead, literal stars complementing the natural ones above. At the top of the page, she wrote the name that had come to her like a defiant echo: Under the Stars Food Park. Morgan fell asleep that night with her notebook beside her, the first genuinely peaceful rest she'd had in years. The path forward wasn't clear yet, but for once uncertainty felt like possibility, rather than limitation. 2 weeks after graduation, Morgan stood in the office of First Austin Bank, her portfolio clutched tightly in hands that refused to tremble despite her racing heart. She wore her only business suit, navy blue purchased for job interviews, and had pulled her hair back into a severe ponytail that added years to her 23-year-old face. "Miss Carter," the loan officer said, closing her portfolio with barely concealed skepticism, "while your business plan is creative, I'm afraid we can't approve this loan. You have no entrepreneurial experience, no collateral beyond the undeveloped land itself, and frankly, the food truck industry is oversaturated." "Food park," Morgan corrected automatically, "not just trucks, permanent structures with rotating concepts." She pulled out her most detailed rendering. The container model reduces initial construction costs by 60% compared to traditional restaurant buildings. The loan officer gave her the placating smile adults reserve for precocious children. "Even so, we typically require 2 years of business operation before considering such ventures. Perhaps come back after you've established yourself in the industry. Start smaller. One food truck, perhaps?" Morgan nodded politely, while disappointment hardened in her stomach. This wasn't her first rejection. It was her fourth this week alone. Each bank had offered the same circular logic: no loan, without experience; no experience without capital; no capital without a loan. Outside on the sun-baked sidewalk, Morgan checked off First Austin on her list. 3 more banks remained in the area, though her hopes diminished with each interview. She had calculated she would need at least $75,000 for the first phase, enough to purchase 2 shipping containers, prepare the site, and establish basic utilities. Her own savings from part-time jobs throughout college amounted to just under $12,000, not nearly enough to begin, yet too much to justify giving up. That evening, Morgan's phone lit up with a text from her mother. "Lily's housewarming this Saturday. Don't forget to bring a nice gift. Casual, elegant dress code." Morgan stared at the message, a familiar hollowness expanding in her chest. She hadn't been home in 2 weeks sleeping, instead on a friend's couch while conducting her loan campaign. Her parents had neither noticed nor commented on her absence. Saturday arrived with merciless sunshine and humidity that transformed the air into something that required effort to breathe. Morgan parked her Honda several houses away from Lily's villa, feeling conspicuously shabby next to the luxury vehicles lining the circular driveway. The gift in her passenger seat was small but thoughtful, a handcrafted wind chime she'd found at a local artisan market, its copper tubes creating deep, resonant tones when stirred by lake breezes. She'd spent nearly a day's food budget on it, wanting to bring something meaningful despite everything. Inside the lakefront villa, floor-to-ceiling windows captured breathtaking views of Lake Austin. Catering staff circulated with champagne and artfully arranged appetizers. Lily held court in the great room, resplendent in a flowing sundress that perfectly complemented the home's aesthetic. "Morgan!" Lily exclaimed when she finally spotted her twin near the kitchen. "You actually came, and look at you, so—" She gestured vaguely at Morgan's simple dress, searching for a compliment that wouldn't come naturally. "Practical." Morgan handed over the wrapped wind chime. "For your deck. The artist uses copper salvaged from historical buildings." Lily accepted it with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "How thoughtful. I'll add it to the gift table." Help yourself to champagne. Oh, and Mom and Dad were looking for you. Something about your summer plans. Morgan nodded, already scanning the room for an escape route. She found her parents near the dock, her father deep in conversation with a distinguished older man she didn't recognize. Morgan! Her mother greeted her with an air kiss near her cheek. We were just discussing your situation. This is Walter Gaines. He owns several apartment buildings and might have maintenance positions available. Entry level, of course, but good experience before technical school. Morgan felt heat rise in her cheeks. I'm not looking for maintenance work, Mom. I'm developing a business plan for the property. Her father turned at this surprise evident in his raised eyebrows. The empty lot, honey. That was just a placeholder. We didn't expect you to actually do anything with it. A placeholder for what? Morgan asked, the champagne flute suddenly precarious in her grip. Her father exchanged glances with her mother. Well, until you figure out your path. Lily always knew what she wanted, but you've been… He paused, searching for a diplomatic phrase. Exploring options. I see. Morgan set down her untouched champagne. Well, I should explore my way home. Early meeting tomorrow. On Sunday, her mother asked, but Morgan was already walking away, the wind chimes packaging crumpling slightly, as she brushed past the gift table on her way to the door. Monday morning found Morgan at Austin Metalworks, a fabrication shop on the city's east side. Instead of a business suit, she wore steel-toed boots and jeans. Instead of a loan proposal, she carried her engineering degree and a determination bordering on desperation. The shop foreman, a barrel-chested man named Ray, with forearms mapped by decades of scars, eyed her skeptically as she filled out the application for the fabricator position. Engineering grad wanting shop work, he asked, leaning against a workbench. This ain't intern-level pay, but it ain't what someone with your education usually seeks either. Morgan met his gaze directly. I need practical experience with industrial-scale metalwork and fabrication, and I need income while I develop a business. Ray's weathered face cracked into a surprising smile. Honest, I like that. Most college kids come in here thinking they'll run the place in 6 months. He gestured toward the shop floor, where sparks flew from welding stations, and the rhythmic clang of metal on metal created a chaotic symphony. You know your way around these tools. Some, Morgan admitted. I've worked with smaller scale equipment. I learn fast. You'll have to. Ray handed back her application with a grease-smudged fingerprint on the corner. Starting pay is $18 an hour. Workday begins at 6 ends when the job's done, usually 8, sometimes 12. You start tomorrow if you want it. Morgan extended her hand. I want it. His massive palm engulfed hers, the handshake firm, but not performatively crushing. Welcome to the Metal Monkeys. Get yourself some proper gloves. Those college hands won't last a day without them. The first weeks at Austin Metalworks redefined Morgan's understanding of exhaustion. She'd thought all-nighters for engineering finals had pushed her limits, but those had been sprints. This was a marathon of physical demands her body wasn't conditioned for. Her hands blistered, then calloused. Her shoulders ached constantly from manipulating heavy materials. Burns from welding sparks became so common, she stopped noticing the small ones. Each night she collapsed into bed at her friend's apartment, too tired even to check her phone for family messages that rarely came. But alongside the exhaustion came exhilaration. Theory transformed into practice as she learned to feel the temperament of different metals, to read the color of flame as an indication of heat, to hear the sound of a properly calibrated saw versus one about to fail. Ray proved a demanding but fair mentor, pushing her when she needed pushing, stepping back when she needed to solve problems herself. By her third week, she'd graduated from cleanup and assistance to handling smaller fabrication jobs on her own. At night, when her body demanded rest, but her mind still raced, Morgan refined her business plan. The initial loan rejections had forced a strategic pivot. Instead of beginning with 2 containers, she would start with 1. Instead of hiring a contractor to prepare the site, she would do what she could herself on weekends, learning as she went. Each paycheck from the fabrication shop went into a separate account labeled Under the Stars. The balance grew painfully slowly, but it grew. 2 months into her new routine, Morgan was welding support brackets when Ray appeared at her station, waiting until she completed her bead before signaling her to lift her mask. Got a special project request, he said, handing her a work order. Custom food truck kitchen equipment. Small operation type budget. Thought you might want to handle it. Seems in line with those container sketches I've seen you working on during breaks. Morgan scanned the order. Compact range hood specialized counters with integrated sinks, all designed to maximize function in minimal space. This is perfect, she said, unable to keep excitement from her voice. When's the deadline? Yesterday, according to the client. Ray chuckled. But realistically, end of next week. It's yours if you want it. Might mean some overtime. I'll take it, Morgan said immediately. And Ray, thank you. He shrugged, already turning away. Just good business, matching the right fabricator to the right job. The food truck project consumed Morgan's waking hours. She worked late into evenings meticulously crafting each component to specifications, while incorporating small innovations that would improve function without adding cost. When the client, a young chef named Marcus starting his first truck, came to inspect the work, his eyes widened. "This is better than what I ordered," he said, running his hand along the seamless counter edge. "The sink integration is genius. It'll save water and improve workflow," Morgan explained. "I added it at no extra charge. Consider it investment in your success." Marcus looked at her curiously. "You're not your typical metal fabricator, are you?" "Neither are you a typical chef," she countered, nodding toward his detailed sketches with notations about heat flow and energy efficiency. He laughed. "Guilty. Engineering dropout turned culinary school graduate. Couldn't decide if I wanted to build things or feed people, so now I'm doing both." "I understand completely," Morgan said, realizing she meant it. For the first time in months, she was speaking with someone who intuitively grasped her hybrid ambitions. As Marcus signed off on the completed work, he hesitated. "I'm looking for a location to park regularly, somewhere with foot traffic but reasonable fees. Any suggestions?" Morgan pulled out her phone, scrolled to a photo of her empty lot. "How about being the first tenant at a new food park still in development, but the location has potential?" Marcus studied the photo, head tilted. "Looks like it needs work." "Everything worth building does," Morgan replied. "But if you're interested, I could offer 4 months free in exchange for helping develop the space." "You own this land." "I do." Marcus extended his hand. "Let's talk details over coffee. I make a mean pour-over." The following Sunday, Morgan and Marcus met at the empty lot, each arriving with vehicles loaded with supplies. While her idea of starting with a single container remained the goal, the immediate task was making the property accessible and functional. They began by clearing the worst of the debris, Marcus bringing unexpected strength to the task of moving rocks and pulling stubborn weeds. Morgan marked boundaries for the future container placement and the areas that would eventually need water and electrical connections. "So your parents just gave you this land as a graduation gift?" Marcus asked during a water break, wiping sweat from his forehead. Morgan's laugh held little humor. "My twin sister got a lakefront villa. I got this plot and a joke about sleeping under the stars." Marcus surveyed the barren landscape. "Harsh." "It was meant to be." Morgan took a long drink of water. "But I'm going to make it the best thing that ever happened to me." They worked until sunset, making modest but measurable progress. Before leaving, they hammered a crude sign into the ground near the road, "Future home of Under the Stars Food Park." As Morgan prepared to drive away, Marcus called out from his truck, "Same time next week." She nodded, unexpected emotion tightening her throat. After months of rejection and solitary planning, having even one person who saw potential in her vision felt like a victory. The weeks fell into a rhythm, weekdays at the fabrication shop learning and earning. Weekends at the lot with Marcus gradually transforming the space. They installed a gravel entrance to eliminate the dust problem, marked out future parking areas, and researched solar-powered lighting options that wouldn't require immediate grid connection. Morgan lived on ramen and determination, her savings growing incrementally while her body grew leaner and stronger. She hadn't visited her family home in over 3 months, exchanging only perfunctory texts with her mother, and nothing at all with her father or Lily. Then came the phone call that changed everything. Morgan was at her workstation grinding excess metal from a seam when Ray signaled urgently for her to stop. He rarely interrupted work in progress, so she immediately cut power to her tools. "Call for you," he said, expression unreadable. "Administrative office, something about a lawyer." Morgan's heart plummeted. Had her parents decided to legally challenge her use of the property? Was this some new humiliation? In the small office, Morgan took the phone with a hand suddenly gone clammy. "This is Morgan Carter." Ms. Carter, this is Patricia Winters from the offices of Jacobson Hayes and Winters. I'm calling regarding the estate of James Carter. Are you available to come to our office this afternoon? Morgan gripped the desk edge. My grandfather. But he passed away almost 2 years ago. Yes, Ms. Carter. Certain aspects of his estate were subject to specific timing conditions. I'd rather not discuss details by phone. Would 3 o'clock work for you? I'll be there, Morgan said automatically, her mind racing. Ray gave her the afternoon off without question when she explained. Family stuff trumps metal stuff, he said simply. Take tomorrow too if you need it. The law office occupied the 8th floor of a downtown high-rise, its reception area furnished in leather and dark wood that spoke of established wealth and discretion. Morgan felt conspicuously out of place in her work clothes, a hasty attempt to clean up in the fabrication shop bathroom, having done little to disguise her occupation. Patricia Winters proved to be a no-nonsense woman in her 60s, her silver hair cut in a precise bob that matched her efficient manner. She led Morgan to a conference room where a metal lockbox sat centered on the polished table. Your grandfather left very specific instructions, Ms. Winters explained, placing a key beside the box. This portion of his estate was to be delivered to you exactly 27 months after his passing. No earlier, no later. He was quite insistent about the timing. Why 27 months? Morgan asked, staring at the lockbox. He didn't explain his reasoning to me, the lawyer replied, only that you would understand when the time came. She nodded toward the box. Would you like privacy to examine the contents? When Morgan nodded, Ms. Winters excused herself with instructions to take as much time as needed. Alone with her grandfather's final message, Morgan's hand trembled slightly as she inserted the key. The box opened with a soft click, revealing an envelope on top of what appeared to be stacks of cash secured with paper bands. The envelope bore her name in her grandfather's distinctive handwriting. She opened it carefully, unfolding a single-page letter. My dear Morgan, if you're reading this, then exactly 27 months have passed since I left this world. 27 months, the time it took me to rebuild after my greatest failure and find my true path. I suspect you might be at a similar crossroads now. Enclosed, you'll find $53,000. Not a fortune, but seed money for whatever you're building. This isn't an inheritance in the traditional sense. This is capital for the vision I know you carry, whatever form it may take. The timing of this delivery is deliberate. Too soon, and it might have seemed like an easy answer. Too late, and you might have abandoned your dreams for practical necessities. At 27 months, you've had time to struggle to refine your ideas through hardship, but not so long that despair has taken root. Use this to build something that matters to you. Not to prove anything to anyone else, but to create what you know should exist in this world. To build from the ground up is to understand the value of every nail, every joint, every decision. Whatever you're constructing now, be it physical or metaphorical, will be stronger for the foundation you've laid with your own hands. Remember, you don't need to be loud to shine. You just need to create something no one can ignore. With endless faith in your capable hands, Grandpa James, P.S. The amount might seem odd. It's exactly what I had when I started over at your age. Worked out well enough for me. Morgan read the letter 3 times, tears blurring her vision by the third reading. The cash in the box, carefully counted and verified before she left the lawyer's office, came to exactly $53,000. Not millions, not a life-changing windfall by most standards, but precisely what she needed at exactly the right moment. The timing suddenly made perfect sense. 27 months meant the money arrived after her graduation, after she'd been given the empty lot, after she'd struggled and planned and worked toward her vision without external support. Her grandfather had known somehow, not the specific circumstances, but the pattern of her life. He'd known she would need not just financial help, but the validation that came from someone believing in her capability to build something meaningful. The first shipping container arrived on a Tuesday morning in early November, 5 months after graduation. Morgan had taken a rare day off from the fabrication shop to oversee its placement on the freshly graded section of her property. The container, 40 feet of corrugated steel painted a deep blue, was lowered precisely onto the concrete footings she and Marcus had painstakingly prepared over weeks of weekend work. As the delivery truck pulled away, Morgan stood before her first tangible building block, trying to absorb the reality of this moment. With her grandfather's unexpected gift, the timeline for Under the Stars had accelerated dramatically. Instead of the single container she'd originally planned as Phase 1, she could now afford 3 along with proper utility connections and site improvements. Marcus pulled up in his food truck parking beside her Honda. He emerged with 2 paper cups of coffee and handed one to Morgan. "Blue looks good," he said, nodding toward the container. "Bold choice." "Each one will be different," Morgan explained. "I want them to have personality even before we customize the interiors." They walked around the container together, Morgan pointing out where windows and doors would be cut, where the kitchen equipment would be positioned, how the outdoor seating would flow from the service window. "When do we start cutting?" Marcus asked, excitement evident in his voice despite his attempt at casual interest. Morgan smiled, feeling lighter than she had in months. "Equipment arrives tomorrow. We start Thursday." The transformation of the container became another rhythm in Morgan's life. Mornings at the fabrication shop, evenings and weekends at the lot. Ray had been surprisingly supportive when she gave notice, reducing her hours rather than accepting her resignation. "This town needs more women-owned businesses," he'd said gruffly. "You work here as much or as little as you need while getting yours off the ground." December brought unseasonably warm weather, perfect for the intensive work of converting the container. Morgan's experience at the fabrication shop proved invaluable as she cut precise openings for windows, installed ventilation systems, and built custom countertops designed specifically for Marcus's culinary style. Word spread among Austin's tight-knit food scene. Other chefs and food entrepreneurs began stopping by, curious about the blue container gradually taking shape in what had been a forgotten corner of the city. Morgan showed them her plans, explained her vision of a communal space where multiple food concepts could thrive with shared infrastructure and cross-promotion. By mid-January, the first container was nearly complete, its interior a gleaming testament to efficiency and thoughtful design. The exterior featured a wide service window, with a roll-up cover custom signage reading, "First Star Kitchen," and solar-powered lights that illuminated the container and surrounding area after dark. Marcus had been testing recipes in his truck parked on site during construction to provide meals for workers and curious visitors. His fusion tacos, combining traditional Mexican techniques with influences from his Filipino heritage, had developed a small but devoted following even before official opening. The night before their scheduled soft opening, Morgan stayed late at the site making final adjustments to the outdoor seating area. Simple picnic tables now dotted the space between the container and the parking area, each with a small potted succulent as a centerpiece. String lights zigzagged overhead, creating a canopy of warm light that transformed the once barren landscape. Around midnight, exhausted but too wired to sleep, Morgan climbed onto the container's roof with a thermos of coffee. The metal still held the day's warmth beneath her as she settled cross-legged, surveying her creation from this elevated perspective. From here, she could see past the immediate boundaries of her property to the distant glow of downtown Austin. The night was clear, stars brilliant overhead, the same stars her parents had mockingly consigned her to sleep under. Tomorrow, First Star would open its window to the public. The first revenue would flow into the business she'd built from nothing but determination. And finally, a bit of help from the one person who had always believed in her. Morgan raised her coffee mug in a silent toast to Grandpa James, to the stars, to the uncertain future that now held more possibility than fear. Whatever came next, success or failure, she had already won a victory against the expectations that had constrained her for so long. As if in answer to her unspoken thoughts, her phone buzzed with a text. She expected Marcus with a last-minute question about tomorrow's opening, but instead saw Lily's name, the first direct communication from her twin in nearly 6 months. "Heard about your food container thing from Mom. Sounds interesting. Might stop by sometime." Morgan stared at the message, unsure what emotion it stirred. Not quite hope, not quite wariness, but something in between. After a long moment, she typed a simple reply. "Opening tomorrow at 11. First tacos on me." She pressed send, then returned her gaze to the stars, their ancient light reaching her across impossible distances. Tomorrow would bring whatever it would bring. Tonight, she had already arrived somewhere important, standing on the foundation she had built herself under stars that no longer represented limitation, but infinite possibility. The morning of First Star's opening dawned with perfect Austin clarity. Crisp January air softened by winter sunshine that promised warmth by midday. Morgan arrived at 6, 3 hours before the scheduled opening, needing this quiet time with her creation, before sharing it with the world. The blue container gleamed in the early light, its freshly painted exterior vibrant against the still raw landscape surrounding it. Where once a withered tree had stood, now carefully transplanted to a better location near the seating area. A gravel pathway led customers from the newly paved parking area to the heart of what would become Under the Stars Food Park. String lights hung dormant overhead, their evening magic temporarily replaced by nature's illumination. Morgan ran her hand along the container's edge. As she walked its perimeter, a ritual of connection with this object she had transformed from industrial cast-off to something entirely new. Inside, the compact kitchen sparkled with possibility. Every surface she'd fabricated herself, every corner designed for maximum efficiency, every detail considered from both practical and aesthetic perspectives. The serving window, large enough to create openness while maintaining the kitchen's integrity, featured a custom countertop of sealed, reclaimed wood, adding warmth to the metal surroundings. Morgan methodically checked systems, water pressure, electrical connections, refrigeration temperatures, ventilation flow. Each functioned perfectly, affirming the meticulous work of the past months. She'd installed redundant systems where critical, a lesson from one of Ray's stories about restaurant failures on opening day due to single points of vulnerability. As she completed her inspection, her phone chimed with a text from Marcus. "On my way, bringing the magic." The magic arrived 30 minutes later. Containers of carefully prepared ingredients, signature sauces made from recipes Marcus guarded zealously, and the distinctive blend of spices that had already earned his food a passionate following during their construction phase pop-ups. He'd spent the previous night in his tiny apartment kitchen, preparing everything to his exacting standards, refusing to cut corners even when fatigue set in. "Nervous?" Marcus asked, arranging his mise en place with practiced precision. At 32, he carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who had faced failure before and survived. The small scar above his right eyebrow from a kitchen accident during his first restaurant job crinkled when he concentrated. Morgan considered the question, surprising herself with the answer. "No. Whatever happens today, we've already succeeded. We built this." She gestured to the space around them. "6 months ago, this was an empty lot and a joke at my expense. Now it's real." Marcus nodded, his usual joking demeanor, momentarily replaced by something more solemn. "It's real because you made it real. Most people would have sold the land or left it sitting empty out of spite." "Spite doesn't build anything worth having," Morgan replied, repeating words her grandfather had once shared during a particularly difficult high school period after Lily had been chosen for a prestigious summer program, while Morgan's engineering camp application had been accidentally lost by their mother. By 10:30, everything was ready. The outdoor seating area had been swept one final time. Speakers mounted discreetly on the container's exterior now played gentle background music, and the "open" sign waited beside the service window, ready to announce their existence to the world. Devi, a culinary school friend of Marcus, who had agreed to help on opening day, arrived just before 11. Her experienced hands would prove invaluable during the inevitable chaos of their first service. At 28, with experience in 3 different restaurant kitchens, Devi brought a steady calm and efficiency that complemented Marcus's creative energy. "This is seriously impressive," she said, surveying the space. "When Marcus said you built a container kitchen, I pictured something much more primitive." Morgan smiled, appreciating the honest assessment. "I wanted it to feel deliberate, not desperate. Too many food trucks look like they're one bad day away from closing." At precisely 11, Morgan hung the sign and stepped back, half expecting a rush of customers, half prepared for hours of silent waiting. The reality fell somewhere between a steady trickle of curious local social media followers who'd track their progress and food scene enthusiasts always eager to discover Austin's newest offering. By noon, a modest line had formed. Morgan handled orders and payments, while Marcus worked his culinary alchemy, and Devi expedited transforming simple ingredients into creations that elicited genuine sounds of pleasure from first-time tasters. Word spread organically, customers texting friends who arrived 30 minutes later, the cycle repeating throughout the afternoon. "How did you hear about us?" Morgan asked one customer, a woman in her early 30s who had ordered one of everything on their concise menu. "Instagram," she replied, adjusting her sunglasses. "Someone I follow posted about shipping containers becoming Austin's coolest new food spot with a location tag. The blue color caught my eye." Morgan made a mental note to strengthen their social media presence. They'd been so focused on the physical space and food quality that their online footprint remained minimal, and oversight she'd need to address quickly. Success in Austin's competitive food scene required visibility across multiple channels. The first minor crisis occurred around 2 o'clock. The propane regulator for one of the cooking surfaces began malfunctioning, threatening to shut down half the kitchen. While Marcus calmly reorganized his process to work with limited equipment, Morgan dropped to her knees, tools already in hand. 8 minutes of focused troubleshooting later, she emerged with grease-streaked cheeks but a functioning system. "Engineering degree finally paying off," Marcus quipped, already returning to his full cooking setup. "Grandpa James paying off," Morgan corrected. "He taught me about pressure regulators when I was 14. The afternoon brought a surprise visitor, Elena Vega, whose food blog Austin Epicurean commanded significant influence in the local culinary scene. Morgan recognized her immediately from her profile photo. Though in person, Elena looked more approachable. Mid-40s, practical clothing hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, and observant eyes that missed nothing as she studied the menu. Morgan maintained her composure, neither highlighting Elena's presence nor offering special treatment that might compromise an authentic assessment. Elena ordered the two most popular items, took a seat at a corner table, and spent 45 minutes observing eating and occasionally making notes in a small leather-bound notebook. When she approached the counter afterward, Morgan felt her heart rate increase slightly. "The owner?" Elena asked directly. "Yes," Morgan confirmed. "Morgan Carter." "Impressive operation," Elena said, gesturing toward the container, "particularly the ventilation system. Most converted spaces like this turn into saunas by mid-service." Morgan blinked, surprised by the technical observation. "Thank you. I designed it specifically to accommodate Texas heat." "I'd like to learn more," Elena said, sliding a business card across the counter. "Call me tomorrow if you're interested in discussing this for a feature." Before Morgan could respond, Elena was already walking toward her car, leaving behind an empty tray and the possibility of publicity that could significantly accelerate their growth. Morgan was distributing orders to a group of university students when she glimpsed a familiar face in line: Lily, her twin sister wearing oversized sunglasses and a casually expensive outfit that made her stand out among the predominantly relaxed crowd. Her honey blonde hair, professionally highlighted last week, according to her Instagram, caught the afternoon sun as she checked her phone while waiting. Their eyes met briefly across the serving counter, a moment of mutual recognition that carried the weight of their complicated history. Morgan nodded slightly, acknowledging her sister's presence without breaking rhythm in her work. Lily returned the gesture with a small smile that contained equal parts curiosity and caution. When Lily reached the front of the line 15 minutes later, the sisters faced each other directly for the first time in months. Up close, Morgan noticed subtle signs of stress around her twin's eyes, despite flawless makeup, the kind of tension that cosmetics couldn't quite conceal. "So this is what you've been doing," Lily said, removing her sunglasses to better survey the operation. Not a question, not quite a compliment, but not the dismissal Morgan might have expected either. "This is part of it," Morgan replied, gesturing to the property beyond the container. "Phase 1 of the full concept." Lily tilted her head, reassessing both the space and her sister in a single evaluative glance. "It's unexpected. In a good way. You built all this yourself." "Most of it," Morgan acknowledged. "Had some help with specialized components." An awkward silence expanded between them, filled with unasked questions and unspoken comparisons. Morgan broke it by gesturing to the menu. "First tacos on me as promised. What'll you try?" Lily ordered the signature lemongrass chicken fusion taco. When it arrived moments later, she took a careful bite, her expression transforming from polite interest to genuine surprise. "This is actually amazing," she admitted the qualifier, actually, revealing her prior skepticism. "Marcus is talented," Morgan said simply. "I was lucky to find him." "The chef?" Lily asked, glancing toward the kitchen where Marcus worked with focused intensity. "Where'd you meet him?" "I built equipment for his food truck while working at a fabrication shop." Morgan explained the abbreviated version of a connection that had become instrumental to Under the Stars. Lily's eyebrows rose slightly. "You were working at a fabrication shop after graduating with an engineering degree." The question carried familiar notes of their parents' perspective, the assumption that certain paths held inherently more value than others. 5 years ago, Morgan might have felt defensive. Today, she simply nodded. "Best decision I could have made. Learned exactly the skills needed to build this place." Lily lingered at the counter longer than other customers, creating a minor bottleneck in the line that Morgan was increasingly aware of. Finally, she seemed to reach some internal decision. "We should talk sometime," Lily said, gathering her things. "About business stuff. I've been doing some marketing work that might be relevant to what you're building here." Morgan kept her expression neutral despite her surprise. "Sure. You have my number." As Lily walked away, Morgan noticed her pausing to take photos of the container and seating area with her phone. The gesture could be interpreted many ways: documentation for their parents' material for social media, genuine interest, or some combination thereof. Whatever the motivation, Morgan refused to assign meaning to it, focusing instead on the growing line of customers actually supporting her vision. By closing time at 8, First Star had served over 200 customers and completely sold out of food, a success by any metric for an opening day. Marcus was elated, his usual reserve dissolved by the unambiguous validation of his culinary vision. Devi had already asked about future shifts, seeing the potential for growth. Morgan felt a deeper, quieter satisfaction. The container had performed exactly as designed. The flow of customers had moved efficiently through the space, and the atmosphere she'd created had encouraged people to linger, creating exactly the community feeling she'd envisioned. After cleaning and closing, Morgan and Marcus sat at one of the picnic tables sharing a celebratory beer, as the string lights created a canopy of artificial stars above them. Devi had left earlier, promising to return for their next service day. "What's that look on your face?" Marcus asked, studying her in the gentle glow. "That's not just good first day satisfaction." Morgan considered the question. "It's more about what's next. Today wasn't the finish line, it was the starting gun." "Container number 2, Marcus guessed, taking a sip of his beer. Morgan nodded, pulling out her notebook where plans for the next phase were already detailed. "With today's revenue and projected income for the next month, we can order the second container by March. Red this time, I think. Different concept, maybe something complementary to your menu, but distinct." "Devi's pastry background would be perfect," Marcus suggested. "She's been talking about wanting her own concept focused on global desserts. The sweet-savory combination could extend our hours into the evening." "You're going to need more help," Marcus observed. "This was manageable with just the two of us, but 2 containers more seating expanded hours." "I know," Morgan agreed. "I'm working on it." She glanced around the property, seeing not what existed now, but what would soon come into being, her vision expanding outward from this first successful node. "What about your sister?" Marcus asked carefully, having observed their interaction earlier. She seemed interested. Morgan tensed almost imperceptibly. "Lily has her own career. This was just curiosity." Marcus nodded, not pressing further. In their months of friendship and collaboration, he'd learned to recognize when Morgan's family history emerged as a barrier. "Well, whoever joins next will have big shoes to fill. We make a good team." Later that night, after Marcus had left, and she'd completed final checks of the property, Morgan climbed onto the container's roof again, a spot that had become her private retreat. The January air had turned properly cold with nightfall, but she wrapped herself in a blanket and settled in, needing this moment of reflection. Her phone contained dozens of congratulatory messages from acquaintances who'd visited throughout the day, along with a surprising text from Ray at the fabrication shop. "Stopped by. Impressive work. Your grandfather would be proud." The simple acknowledgement from her mentor carried particular weight validation from someone who truly understood the craftsmanship involved. Conspicuously absent were messages from her parents. Lily had undoubtedly told them about her visit, perhaps even shown them photos, but whatever their reaction, they hadn't felt compelled to reach out directly. Morgan found she cared less about this silence than she would have expected. The container beneath her, the day's success, the plans taking shape for expansion, these tangible achievements spoke louder than any parental recognition could. As she scanned through the messages, a new text arrived from an unknown number. Saw your food container placed today. Innovative concept. Interested in discussing potential coverage for my blog. Elena Vega, Austin Food Explorer. Morgan recognized the name immediately. Elena Vega ran one of the most influential food blogs in Central Texas, her reviews capable of launching restaurants into immediate popularity or consigning them to obscurity. That she'd visited on opening day without identifying herself was typical of her approach. That she was reaching out directly afterward was unprecedented. Morgan saved the number and composed a careful reply. Thank you for visiting. Would be happy to discuss. Available any morning before opening. The response came almost immediately. Tomorrow 9 a.m. we'll bring coffee. Morgan stared at the confirmation, understanding its potential significance. 6 months of working in obscurity, of being dismissed and underestimated, might transform overnight with the right kind of publicity. Not that she'd built First Star for validation she hadn't, but strategic attention would accelerate her larger vision for Under the Stars Food Park. As she climbed down from the container and headed to her car, Morgan thought about foundations, how they're laid invisibly below what eventually becomes visible, how they determine what can be built above them, how their strength is tested not in calm conditions, but when pressure is applied. Today had been the first real test of the foundation she'd established, and it had held firm. Elena Vega arrived precisely at 9 the following morning, carrying 2 cups from a local coffee roaster and a small notebook. Unlike many influencers who had emerged in Austin's food scene, Elena had actual restaurant experience, 15 years as a chef before transitioning to food writing after a wrist injury limited her kitchen capabilities. Her observant eyes missed nothing as Morgan gave her a tour of the operation. You fabricated all this yourself? Elena asked, running a professional finger along a countertop seam so precise it was nearly invisible. I did, Morgan confirmed. I worked at Austin Metalworks while developing the concept, learned fabrication specifically for this project. Ray's shop? Elena asked, referencing the fabrication business. He doesn't typically take on novices. Morgan nodded, surprised at the connection. You know, Ray, Austin's food and maker communities overlap more than people realize, Elena replied. Ray built the custom grills for my restaurant back when I was still cooking. He doesn't waste time on people without potential. The shared connection shifted their conversation from formal interview to professional exchange. Elena's questions became more specific, more technical, probing not just the physical space, but the philosophy behind it. And the chef Marcus correct. How did that partnership develop? I built custom equipment for his food truck, Morgan explained, detailing their first meeting at the fabrication shop and the gradual recognition of complementary visions. He understands food the way I understand structures from the foundation up. Their conversation continued for nearly an hour, Elena's questions precise and occasionally challenging. Morgan answered honestly, neither overselling nor downplaying her ambitions for Under the Stars. Your biggest challenge moving forward? Elena asked, making notes as they walked the property perimeter. Morgan considered carefully. Scaling without losing identity. I want to grow, but not at the expense of what makes this place special. Each container needs to feel like an individual creation within a cohesive community. As they wrapped up, Elena paused before leaving. I'm curious about something. The name Under the Stars, it feels personal. Is there a story there? Morgan hesitated, weighing how much to reveal. Personal stories could create connection with customers, but they could also invite unwanted attention to family dynamics she preferred to keep private. After a moment, she decided on honesty. When my parents gave me this plot of land, they joked that I could sleep under the stars. It was meant to highlight how little they thought of the gift compared to what they gave my twin sister. And now, Elena pressed gently, now, I'm turning their punchline into my headline, Morgan replied simply. Elena nodded, satisfaction evident in her expression. That's the angle I was looking for. Expect the piece to go live next week. And Morgan, what you've built here is genuinely impressive, regardless of what initiated it. The blog post appeared the following Tuesday, its headline immediately capturing attention. From family punchline to culinary innovation under the stars, reimagines Austin's food scene. Elena's review was comprehensive and glowing, praising not just the food, but the thoughtful design, sustainable practices, and entrepreneurial vision behind the project. She detailed Morgan's background and approach, without sentimentality, but with evident respect, positioning Under the Stars as the beginning of something significant rather than a novelty concept. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Wednesday's customer count tripled Tuesday's. By Friday, lines formed before opening and remained consistent throughout the day. Marcus had to make emergency supply runs between lunch and dinner service, and Morgan called in 2 friends to help manage the flow of orders and maintain the seating area. The sudden influx created new challenges. Their water supply wasn't sized for such volume. The single bathroom became inadequate, and parking overflowed onto neighboring vacant lots. Problems that might have emerged gradually over months now demanded immediate attention. Friday evening, after another day of overwhelming business, Morgan met with Marcus and Devi, who had officially joined the team given the unexpected acceleration of their timeline. We need to address infrastructure before aesthetics, Morgan said, sketching modifications to their site plan. Water, power, waste, everything needs upgrading immediately, and we need proper parking before someone complains to the city. What about the second container? Devi asked, enthusiasm for her dessert concept evident. Do we delay? Morgan shook her head. No, we accelerate. The attention we're getting now won't last forever. We need to capitalize while we can. I'll order the red container tomorrow. Can you be ready in 3 weeks? Devi's eyes widened. 3 weeks to develop a full menu and prepare? I can help, Marcus offered. My station is operating smoothly now. I can spare some prep time for menu development. Morgan watched their interaction, appreciating how quickly they'd formed a functional team. Successful businesses often hinged on these relationships as much as on the product or concept. Her engineering mind had always focused on systems and structures, but Under the Stars was teaching her about the equally complex human infrastructure required. By the end of January, the financial projections Morgan had carefully calculated were rendered obsolete by their overwhelming success. The timeline for expansion accelerated accordingly. Container number 2 could be ordered immediately rather than in March, and site preparation for its arrival became the new priority. The first significant setback occurred in early February. A city inspector arrived unannounced, responding to a complaint about unpermitted modifications to the property. Morgan received the call from Marcus while meeting with their newly hired electrician about power upgrades. He shut us down until we get proper permits, Marcus explained, voice tight with concern. Says we've exceeded the scope of our original authorization. Morgan arrived back at the property to find an official notice posted on the container door. The inspector, a methodical man in his 50s named Terrence Garcia, was still on site making notes about various violations. Mr. Garcia, Morgan approached calmly, introducing herself. I understand there are concerns about our permits. Ms. Carter? He nodded, professional rather than antagonistic. Your original permit was for a single mobile food unit. What you've built is significantly more permanent with infrastructure modifications that require different approvals. Morgan listened carefully, neither defensive nor argumentative. What do we need to do to resolve this properly? Her approach, solution-focused rather than confrontational, seemed to surprise the inspector. He explained the specific permits required, the application process, and the necessary modifications to meet code requirements for a permanent food establishment. Given your current setup, you're looking at least 3 to 4 weeks before you can reopen, he concluded. Morgan absorbed this information, mind already recalculating timelines and financial implications. A month of closure would devastate their momentum and potentially bankrupt the fledgling business. Is there any provisional approval process while we work through the full permitting? She asked. We have 15 employees now depending on these jobs. Garcia hesitated, then pointed to a section of the code on his tablet. There's a conditional operation permit for businesses in transition, requires daily safety inspections and immediate compliance with critical regulations, but would allow limited operation while the paperwork processes. By that evening, Morgan had filed the necessary applications, paid the expedited processing fees from their dwindling cash reserves, and developed a compliance plan addressing each cited violation. She worked through the night preparing the required documentation, researching precedents, and creating detailed drawings of their current and planned modifications. The following morning, she met Garcia at the city offices with a comprehensive proposal that addressed not only the immediate concerns, but anticipated future regulatory requirements as their business expanded. Her engineering background proved invaluable, allowing her to speak the technical language of building codes and safety regulations. Most businesses fight the process, Garcia commented, reviewing her materials. You've actually improved on some of our standard solutions. 3 days later, Under the Stars reopened with a conditional permit, albeit with reduced hours and capacity restrictions. The temporary limitations actually worked in their favor, creating an air of exclusivity that drove interest and allowed them to refine their operations before returning to full capacity. The permit crisis had another unexpected benefit. It forced Morgan to develop relationships with city officials who would prove crucial to their expansion plans. By treating regulators as collaborators rather than adversaries, she established Under the Stars as a business committed to proper processes rather than cutting corners. February brought unseasonably warm weather and continued growth. Morgan hired her first official employees beyond the core team, a college student to handle counter service, a recent culinary program graduate to assist Marcus, and a part-time bookkeeper to manage the increasingly complex finances. With basic operations stabilized, Morgan divided her time between managing daily functions and developing the second phase. The red container arrived in early March, its placement carefully aligned with the original blue structure to create a deliberate sightline from the road. This time, the conversion process moved faster, Morgan's experience with the first container eliminating trial and error delays. The interior would house Devi's dessert operations, specializing in globally inspired sweet creations, aptly named Sweet Orbit. 2 weeks into the construction process, Morgan received an unexpected call from Ray at the fabrication shop. "One of my suppliers mentioned you ordered custom equipment for another container," he said without preamble. "You should have come to me. I could have saved you money." "I didn't want to impose," Morgan explained. "You've already helped more than I could have asked." Ray's grunt conveyed multiple layers of meaning. "That food park of yours is becoming something. I drive by sometimes, see the lines. Figured you might want to talk about a more systematic approach to your expansion." The conversation led to a partnership agreement. Ray would provide fabrication services at preferred rates in exchange for equity in Under the Stars parent company, which Morgan had recently established to facilitate growth. His expertise would ensure consistency across future containers, while allowing Morgan to focus on overall strategy rather than hands-on construction of each unit. The equity arrangement represented Morgan's first external business partnership, a significant step beyond the operational collaboration with Marcus and Devi. Ray brought not just technical expertise, but decades of business experience navigating Austin's changing landscape. At 62, he had seen boom and bust cycles that most young entrepreneurs couldn't imagine, providing valuable perspective as Morgan planned for long-term sustainability. Sweet Orbit opened in late March to immediate enthusiasm, its globally inspired desserts providing the perfect complement to Marcus's savory offerings. The timing coincided with Austin's spring festival season, bringing waves of visitors eager to explore local food scenes between music performances and art exhibitions. The container's vibrant red exterior, visible from the main road, became a distinctive landmark in an area previously known only to locals. Inside, Devi had created a space that balanced efficiency with warmth, incorporating elements from the various cultures represented in her dessert creations. Indian, French, Japanese, and Mexican influences coexisting harmoniously. Morgan had designed the second container with intentional differences from the first. While maintaining functional excellence, she wanted each space to reflect its unique culinary identity, rather than imposing rigid standardization. The result felt cohesive without being formulaic, establishing a pattern for future expansion. As Under the Stars expanded physically, its reputation grew proportionally. Local media picked up where Elena's blog had started, featuring the food park in segments about innovative Austin businesses. The distinctive containers became Instagram-worthy backgrounds, bringing a younger demographic that complemented their core customer base of food enthusiasts and neighborhood regulars. Morgan reinvested almost every dollar of profit improving infrastructure, adding proper restroom facilities, enhancing the outdoor seating area, with shade structures and misting systems for the approaching summer heat. The barren lot transformed incrementally but steadily, hardscaping and drought-resistant landscaping replacing cracked earth and weeds. Throughout this period of growth, Morgan had minimal contact with her family. Occasional text exchanges with Lily provided her only window into their lives, and these communications remained superficial general updates without emotional content. Morgan found herself too busy to dwell on the distance, her days filled with purposeful work and her expanding vision for Under the Stars. In early April, as Morgan reviewed applications for a third food concept, her phone rang with an unfamiliar number. She almost sent it to voicemail, assuming it was yet another vendor solicitation, but answered at the last moment. Morgan Carter speaking. Ms. Carter, this is Jordan Weeks from Austin Monthly Magazine. We're putting together our annual 30 Under 30 feature, highlighting young entrepreneurs changing Austin's landscape. Your name has come up repeatedly in our research. Morgan blinked, momentarily speechless. Austin Monthly's recognition carried significant weight in local business circles, their annual list considered a reliable predictor of ventures that would shape the city's future. That's unexpected, she managed finally. Jordan laughed lightly. Is it? You've created one of the most talked about food destinations in Austin within less than a year, with an innovative model that's already being imitated. We'd like to include you in the feature, which would involve a professional photo shoot and interview at your location. After confirming details, Morgan ended the call and sat perfectly still, processing this new development. Professional recognition had never been her primary motivation. She'd built Under the Stars first from necessity, then from vision. But acknowledgement from Austin's business community represented a different kind of validation than customer enthusiasm or revenue. That evening, she received a text from Lily. Heard about Austin Monthly. Congratulations. The simple message contained neither warmth nor hostility, just acknowledgement of information received. Morgan replied with equal brevity, "Thank you." Their relationship had evolved into this strange, distant cordiality, neither the childhood closeness they'd never had, nor the complete estrangement one might expect given their history. The photo shoot took place the following week, the magazine sending a full creative team who spent hours capturing images of Morgan among her containers, directing employees, reviewing plans with contractors for the next expansion phase. The photographer, a woman in her 50s, with an artist's discerning eye, positioned Morgan on the roof of the blue container for the final shots, the food park spread below her like a small kingdom of her creation. Perfect, the photographer murmured, as Morgan gazed across her domain, unaware of how the evening light illuminated her features and highlighted the quiet confidence she had developed. This is the money shot the builder surveying what she's built. While the team packed their equipment, Jordan conducted the interview portion, asking questions about Morgan's background, inspiration, and future plans for Under the Stars. When the conversation inevitably touched on the property's origin, Morgan provided a measured response. The land came to me as a graduation gift, she explained, though at the time its potential wasn't obvious to everyone. I saw possibility where others saw limitations. And now, Jordan asked, has your family's perspective changed? Morgan chose her words carefully. Success tends to clarify vision, but what matters most is that I saw the potential from the beginning. The resulting feature, published in May's issue, presented Morgan as a visionary entrepreneur who had transformed a literal blank slate into Austin's most distinctive dining destination. The accompanying photos captured both the physical evolution of Under the Stars and Morgan's personal transformation from overlooked graduate to business innovator. The magazine hit newsstands on a Wednesday. By Thursday evening, Morgan had received dozens of congratulatory messages, 3 interview requests from larger publications, and an invitation to speak at an entrepreneurship conference. Her phone continued buzzing with notifications as she closed up for the night, but one text message stood out from the others from her father, the first direct communication in nearly 10 months. Your mother and I saw the magazine article. Very impressive work with the food containers. Would like to stop by sometime and see it in person. Morgan stared at the message, conflicting emotions surfacing like competing weather fronts. Part of her wanted to respond with cold professionalism. Under the Stars is open Tuesday through Sunday, 11 a.m. to 10 p.m. No reservations required. Another part craved the parental recognition she'd been denied throughout childhood, tempted to respond enthusiastically to this belated interest. She settled on simple neutrality. Thank you. You're welcome anytime. Best to come weekday afternoons when it's less crowded. No response came that night, nor the following day. Morgan focused on operations, intentionally immersing herself in the comfortable certainty of work, rather than the ambiguity of family dynamics. The weekend brought record customer numbers, consistent lines at both containers, and the pleasant exhaustion of success. The third container, painted a vibrant yellow that complemented the existing blue and red structures, was scheduled for delivery the following Tuesday. This unit would house a frozen dessert concept designed specifically to combat Austin's approaching summer heat, featuring artisanal popsicles, dairy-free sorbets, and creative frozen treats developed by a culinary school classmate of Devi's. Morgan's original vision was taking physical form more rapidly than she had dared hope, the property's transformation from barren lot to vibrant destination unfolding with increasing momentum. Each container added not just culinary variety, but contributed to the emerging identity of Under the Stars as a place where creativity and community intersected. The land that had once represented rejection now symbolized possibility, not just for Morgan, but for the chefs who found platform for their culinary vision, the employees who discovered opportunities for growth, and the customers who experienced the joy of unexpected discovery in what had previously been an overlooked corner of Austin. As Morgan reviewed final preparations for the yellow container's arrival, she reflected on the journey from graduation day to this moment. The path hadn't been linear or easy, but each obstacle had ultimately strengthened both her resolve and her creation. What her family had intended as dismissal had become the foundation for something they could never have imagined. Something entirely her own, built by her hands, guided by her vision, sustained by her determination. Under the Stars had begun as reaction, but evolved into creation, transcending its origins, to become something that existed for its own purpose, rather than as response to rejection. In this transformation lay Morgan's true victory, not proving others wrong, but proving herself right. Not seeking external validation, but creating something of inherent value. The following days would bring new challenges, new opportunities, and eventually a confrontation with her family that would test the strength of all she had built, both the physical structure of Under the Stars and the internal foundation of her hard-won self-reliance. But whatever came next, Morgan faced it from a position of accomplishment rather than deficit, standing on ground. She had transformed from barren to abundant through her own capability. The joke her parents had made at graduation, "You can sleep under the stars," had lost its power to wound. Instead, it had become prophecy of an entirely different kind than they had intended. Under these stars, Morgan had indeed found her place not in limitation, but in the boundless possibility of a sky without ceiling, of potential without constraint, of a vision realized through persistence and purpose.